Well, good evening, and welcome to the Hallelujah Diet presentation on building immunity through oral health. We're really excited to be with you this evening. I'm Paul Malcolmus, President and CEO of Hallelujah Acres. I'd like to start by just wishing you a Happy New Year and praying that you have a healthy and successful 2017. And we're thankful that you've made the decision to start the new year off by joining us tonight. We have a great speaker, which we'll get to in just a minute, and I think this topic is really one that'll be interesting from the perspective that it's not a topic that we usually think about in a general health concept. So we'll get into that in a few minutes, but first I'd like to do a little housekeeping. First, if you stay with us to the end of the presentation, we'll be doing a drawing for 3-month supplies of oral health products, and there'll be 3 winners for that. So we look forward to announcing the winners at the very end. Throughout the presentation, if you would go ahead and ask questions, you can do that on the lower left-hand side of your screen. And what we'll do is we'll collect those questions and we'll relay those on to the speaker when we get toward the end of the presentation. But we'll let her do the presentation without the interruption of the questions, but feel free to ask the questions. Before I introduce our speaker, I'd like to open with a word of prayer and ask the Lord to bless our time together. Dear Lord, we just thank you for the opportunity to share this message, Lord, and we thank you for the many people that are joining us. We pray that you'll give our speaker the words to say and that all technology will work smoothly, and pray that we're able to relay a very important message to the people on the phone tonight. And I pray that we honor you in everything we do. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, Nena Dockery is our speaker tonight, and she began her career as a medical researcher. And through her own life experiences, Nena cultured a passion for maintaining health through lifestyle and supplementation. She later published her master's degree in human nutrition. She has worked for the past 18 years in the nutritional supplement industry, where she has concentrated on providing education on the beneficial effects of specific ingredients and supplement products. Nena has diverse experience in the natural health field beyond education and has written numerous articles for industry journals and given presentations worldwide. She has organized clinical research projects and overseen patent applications. Nena is knowledgeable in virtually all areas of the dietary supplement health industry. And we're real privileged to have Nena with us tonight. Welcome, Nena, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. It's my pleasure to be here.
And we look forward to hearing what you have to share this evening.
Thank you. Okay, with that said, I guess it's up to me now, so I'm going to go ahead. This is my first experience with this particular format, so hopefully everything will run smoothly, and I ask your forgiveness if I stumble through anything in the presentation. We're going to start by looking at this very unique probiotic product that you all, our Hallelujah Diet, is introducing. And I will take some time to really reflect and look at some of the unique qualities of the ingredients that are a part of this product, this particular product, and hopefully give you a little bit better understanding as to how they work within our body. This product is very unique in many ways. It is designed to support immune health both in children and adults, beginning in the oral cavity and then extending throughout the gastrointestinal tract. I think many of us don't really reflect upon the fact that this oral health, this immune health, really starts in our mouths and then continues through our entire gastrointestinal tract and then throughout our entire body. What is unique about this product as well is the fact that it is safe and effective for both children and adults. And as you will see as we proceed through, a lot of the research has actually been conducted in children, so we know that it is safe for that particular demographic. The formulation is exceptional in many ways, and mostly due to the ingredients, the ingredient combination that is very unique to this product. The first ingredient is Bliss K12. This is a rare strain of the bacteria Streptococcus salivarius, which is indigenous in the oral cavity of around 2% of the human population. Streptococcus salivarius is one of the most common bacterial species that is found in the oral cavity of healthy individuals. However, the Bliss K12 strain is a rare strain only found in about 2% of the human population, and it provides unique and very rare benefits to that group of people. Along with that strain is a probiotic proprietary blend of Lactobacillus casei, Lactobacillus plantarum, Lactobacillus paracasei, Lactobacillus rhamnosus, and Lactobacillus salivarius, particular strains of these species as well that also provide unique immune support to the individual. So first of all, we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at the Bliss K12 that is in this product. So I want to ask a question at this time, and you can think about it a little bit and then answer it for me. What is the best way that you know of to protect your upper respiratory health? Do you use an antimicrobial mouthwash? Washing your hands often? How about supporting a healthy microbiome throughout the body? All of the above? Maybe both B and C and not the others. What do you think? I'll give you just a moment to reflect on that, and then we'll discuss it in further detail. Okay, I see a slowdown in the responses now. Let's look at it. The first answer is use an antimicrobial mouthwash. Many of us who have been around for any length of time are very familiar with Listerine and any number of other mouthwashes that are on the market that have antimicrobial properties. For a lot of these, though, they work in a similar way to the way antibiotics work in our gastrointestinal tract. And what do we know about that? We know that they serve a very good purpose for taking care of some bacteria that we don't want in our system. However, when they destroy those bad guys, a lot of times they also destroy the good guys along with them. And what few people realize is there are some good guys living in our oral cavity. There are some good bacteria in our oral cavity, and we want to keep those healthy. So really, using an antimicrobial mouthwash might not be the best option. Washing your hands often. Yes, of course, we all know that. That is one of the best preventative measures that we can take. We also want to support a healthy microbiome. We are just now beginning to really appreciate the importance of the microbiome, the importance of these bacteria and other microbes that live throughout our body and really provide a lot of health benefits to us. So the correct answer, I'm going to have to say, is B and C. In some cases, A might be true too, so you would get an all of the above. But in general, let's try to keep that microbiome in our mouth just as healthy as the one in our GI tract. Okay, so let's proceed on after talking about that and look at that oral microbiome. Just like in the lower digestive tract, we think about and we've really become to learn a lot about the bacteria that exist in our lower digestive tract and how they provide such wonderful and needed benefits to our overall health. Well, just like that, the oral cavity is home to an extensive microbiome. Actually, as far as the diversity of species, there are probably more species of bacteria in our mouth than live in our GI tract. And they provide a great deal of benefits to us, some more than others. And just like in our GI tract, the oral bacterial composition of each person is unique. Some naturally have a healthier bacterial environment than others. Some have a very poor bacterial environment in their mouths. And this healthy oral cavity provides one of the best environments for supporting both dental health and periodontal health, and it's the first line of defense against ingested pathogens. So when we breathe in through our mouths, when we eat something that perhaps has a undesirable bacteria in it, our oral cavity, what is living in our oral cavity, is the first line of defense against those. And we know that any number of things, stress, disease, aging, many medications, and other types of ingested substances can disrupt this balance. We may start out early in life with a very healthy oral cavity, and after a few years, with maybe poor habits, just stress of life, any number of other conditions can change the health of our oral microbiome. So with that said, I want to look at Bliss K12. Bliss K12 is an indigenous oral strain of bacteria from the oral cavity. So it is not one that is foreign to us. It is one that is indigenous, however, being a very rare strain. And it targets the oral cavity. It exists, its pH for optimal existence is that neutral pH that occurs within the oral cavity. It is a strain of Streptococcus salivarius, which is one of the primary bacteria, as I said earlier, found in the mouths of healthy individuals. The natural occurrence of this K12 strain in humans is very low, however, probably less than 2%. And it has a demonstrated ability to colonize in the oral cavity because it is indigenous to it. There was an extensive amount of research that went into the discovery of this particular strain, looking at countless individuals and what made some individuals stand out. Some individuals that didn't get sick, that didn't get upper respiratory infections, that would go through their childhood and even adulthood and would have many fewer respiratory infections than the general population. And we can usually see that as children. These are children that don't have strep throat. They're children that don't have middle ear infections that are so common in children. And this is unique in a number of ways. One of the main one is that this particular strain of bacteria not only works through competitive inhibition. In other words, it is existing, it is colonizing in the oral cavity, so the pathogenic bacteria, the undesirable bacteria, don't have a place to go. Of course it works that way, as most probiotics do. However, these Bliss bacteria work in a different way as well. They produce specific inhibitory peptides called salivariacins that contribute to its demonstrated efficacy. And these substances actually physically attack certain other bacteria, these pathogenic bacteria. They actually attack them. And so they provide benefits beyond competitive inhibition alone. The K12 strain was originally isolated from a child, from the mouth of a child who was not susceptible to throat and upper respiratory infections. And not only that, though, it supports both upper respiratory health, and as we will see later on, also helps reduce halitosis. So what we want to look at, let's take a little bit closer look at exactly what this Bliss K12 strain does in the body. It is a beneficial trait of health-promoting strains is in that they have a production. They produce these bacteriocin-like inhibitory substances, or Bliss. And that is more than just competitive inhibition. It produces two of these salivariacins, or Bliss substances, that have activity against certain other bacterial strains, particularly in the case of the K12 bacteria against Streptococcus pyogenes. Streptococcus pyogenes is one of the predominant strains that causes strep throat. And these two salivariacins, or salivariacin A, salivariacin B, they have been targeted, they have been identified as those that produce these beneficial traits. And what they do is they don't work like an antibiotic. They actually physically attack these specific strains of other bacteria that they deem undesirable, and we deem undesirable, and they puncture the cell walls of those bacteria. When they do so, they release the contents, and by releasing the contents, it destroys these other bacteria. So unlike an antibiotic that attacks a particular protein, and then the undesirable bacteria simply mutate just a hair, change the protein, become resistant to the antibiotic. These work in a different way. They work by physically attacking those particular bacteria. So it's very unique. So I'm going to ask another question for you to think about just a little bit. Acute respiratory infections are the most common illnesses evaluated in an outpatient setting. How common are upper respiratory infections? Do you think they are the most common one? Would that be true or false? And I'm seeing from the responses that we have an overwhelmingly correct answer. Yes, upper respiratory infections are the most common illnesses that are seen in an outpatient setting by doctors. So this would include everything from the common cold all the way up to, say, strep throat, epiglottis type of problems, any type of these upper respiratory infections, including, of course, pneumonia as well. So they are very common infections. They lead to visits to the doctor, particularly in children, where we see that's so common, particularly middle ear infections. So this Bliss K12 can provide the first line of defense. We know that most pathogens will enter through the oral cavity or they'll enter through the nose. And some of these pathogens, such as Streptococcus pneumonia, spread from the nasopharynx up through the middle ear via the eustachian tube. And when they do, they can then cause middle ear infections that are just a particular problem to young children. Bliss K12 has the ability to not only to colonize the oral cavity, but it does so particularly along the back of the tongue, and then it actually can migrate or ascend into the nasopharynx and provide protection into the ears as well. I want to look briefly at some of the research, and there has been, I'm just going to focus on some of the clinical trials, but there are numerous trials that led up to these actual clinical trials that were conducted with the Bliss K12 strain. This first, it was an independent trial conducted in Italy. The product was called Back to Bliss. It is not sold in the United States. It was developed in Italy, and it is sold predominantly in Europe. There were 82 children involved, and 65 of these children had recurrent acute otitis media, or they had tonsillitis. So strep throat, any type of throat infection, or ear infections. These children had recurrent ones, which means they had probably 3 or 4 on average each year. And in this case, for this study, they had at least 3 in the prior year. 41 actually completed, which is a very high number for a study that includes children, were treated with the K12 strain. 20 were not treated. So they did not get the K12 strain, and 41 essentially did get the K12. 17 children then were used as basically as controls. They were children that did not have recurrent problems, and they were not treated. They were followed during the same time period. As we know, sometimes some years are worse than others as far as the incidence of these type of bacterial infections. So they wanted to use this group of controls, these 17 children, to just look at yearly variations in the incidence of these bacterial infections. Now, so they did not receive anything, and they served as a control. It was a 90-day treatment period, and that treatment period occurred during the winter months, So this occurred during the time period when children would be most likely to get these infections. And it was followed by a 6-month follow-up period in which they observed the children for residual protection. So they were no longer taking the Bliss K12, but was there some colonization and therefore producing residual protection. And then they followed that up with 40 adults, the same study. They did not look at acute otitis media. They did not look at middle ear infections in adults because adults don't typically have those. But they did look at the recurrent tonsillitis, and in this case, greater than 4 episodes in the prior year. 20 were treated with K12, 20 were not treated. They served as the control. It ran for a 90-day treatment period, again with the 6-month follow-up. Now, when they looked at these children, they compared their incidence, this group, with the incidence from the prior year. And that's really the only way to adequately evaluate how it is working, to see, okay, this was the incidence in this entire year. This is how many infections they had. Then they looked at just a 3-month period with the treatment compared to the incidence the entire prior year. Those who did not take the Bliss, you can see year 1, year 2. Now this red column on the left, I'm going to use the little pointer here to show you. See if I can, okay, right here. This one here, and I probably should use the pointer, I'm using the pencil here, but you can see this is the incidence of those children that did not take the Bliss. Now we're looking at the 3-month period. The reason this red bar is higher than the blue bar the first year is because this is in the 3-month period that they're more likely going to have infections. So of course the incidence is going to be higher. The children that did take the Bliss, as we see in this column here, had in that 3-month period a 92% drop in the incidence of infections. Now if we look over here, I'm going to change this to a pointer. If we look over here, we see the same thing with middle ear infections. In the ones who were not treated, we see the incidence of middle ear infections in that time period being pretty high, and those, because this would coincide with the incidence that they had on an average basis, for the children that had the treatment, the chance of getting a middle ear infection dropped, the incidence dropped by 40%. Now, in adults, we look at the same thing. We see those that did not take the Bliss, their incidence during this 3-month period. We see this bar here. Of those who did take the Bliss, the incidence compared to the prior year dropped by 84%. And that's with a P. We see that as a statistical significance of less than 0.01%. So there was another trial completed after that. So they saw that just dramatic drop in the incidence of these ear infections and throat infections in both children and adults after taking the Bliss. Now, what I don't show on those slides is during that follow-up period of 6 months, there continued to be residual protection that gradually over time subsided until they got back into the same risk that they had had before taking it. However, there was residual protection showing that there was colonization. The third clinical trial with finished product, basically designed the same way, the same company did it. This time, they looked at 61 children, but 20 of these children they looked at for viral infections. It doesn't specify which viral infections, but they know that they did not test positive for Streptococcus pyogenes, or one of the bacteria that typically cause the ear infections. They studied treatment was again 90 days. They again compared it to the prior year. What they did on this one, though, again, they looked at a secondary endpoint in which they looked at days under antibiotic use. days looking at that the children had to take fever-reducing therapy, days off of work and school for the caregiver. All of these factors, these secondary factors, were also taken into account in this study as well. Once again, we're going to see basically the same type of results. For those children that were taking the Bliss, the drop in incidence was 97% compared to the prior year, and with those that were untreated, it was a year that was not quite as bad, but still you see the significant bar here on the right that shows that they had a little bit of drop compared to the previous year, but nothing like a 97% drop over here. Now, the interesting thing is, in looking at viral-mediated pharyngotonsillitis, strep throat basically that was caused by a viral etiology, they saw a drop of 80% even in those. And once again, it was not quite as bad a year compared to the year before, but those that were untreated, still the incidence was much higher. The fourth clinical trial, once again, they do another one. This time they looked at children. Most of the trials have been conducted in children. They looked at children that not only had middle ear infections, but they also had a condition called secretory otitis media, or SOM. Any of you who have children, you are probably very well aware of this condition. They have an ear infection, a bacterial, ear infection. It is resolved with antibiotics, but the child still has complaints. Their ears are clogged. They have fluid in their ears. They still see something going on, even though they no longer have the bacterial infection itself. They were not infectious. They did from the beginning, they looked at children that were not infections or on antibiotics at the time of the trial onset. So they be sure they had washed out of all of these children to look to make sure they were clean to begin with. They evaluated then the ability of K12 to protect against both the middle ear infections themselves and then against this secretory otitis media. And they looked at that by looking at their ability to hear, the appearance of their eardrum, any type of inflammation in the nose, in the ears. They also looked at their tonsils. They looked at all of these factors as well. And they also looked at, of course, the safety of the K12 strain. What they found from that, it reduced the incidence of the otitis media. It improved their hearing ability, improved their tympanic membrane scores. They looked inside the ears. They didn't see the inflammation in the eardrum. They looked at obstruction of the nasal sinuses. They saw reduction there. Tonsillar swelling in the tonsils themselves. They also noted it was very safe and well tolerated for the children. So, and those, I have graphs on those as well. They are not in this particular presentation, but the results were just as dramatic as the ones that we have seen heretofore in the other studies. The fifth clinical trial was conducted on 130 children. They also had upper respiratory infections. 76 were treated, 54 served as untreated control groups, and this was an observational study. It ran 90 days, and these were evaluated by a particular type of infection, this group A beta hemolytic streptococci. And they were monitored then for an additional 9 months after the treatments ceased. Again, this was an independent study, and it was used in Italy with the same product. Conclusions, it was provided a valuable option. This one, as I said, was an observational study for children who were otherwise might be subject to frequent antibiotic regimens. We think of children, they end up having to stay home. They're on antibiotics, which actually makes them then more vulnerable to subsequent infections. They also run the risk of infecting other family members. And so it causes a whole string of problems that can be really essentially problems for the entire family. They had significantly fewer infections than the untreated group, both during the 90-day treatment period and then the following 9 months as well. Confirm the results again from the other studies. So in summary of all of these, we see that this K12 strain dramatically reduces the incidence of select viral, bacterially induced ear and throat complaints, reduces symptoms of secretory otitis media, which is that fluid in the ears, reduces the use of antibiotics and antipyretics, fever reducers, helps decrease the likelihood of spreading the bugs through the family, or the family then on through people at work even. Helps reduce the cost and stress from days lost at school or work due to these seasonal upper respiratory infections. Now, the benefits don't stop there. One of the extra benefits of this Bliss K12 is its use for halitosis, the main source of chronic bad breath. And these are not people that have eaten a lot of garlic, but these are people who have chronic bad breath. And it's due to an imbalance of bacteria residing in the oral cavity. You have these odoriferous species such as Porphyromonas, I knew I would mess that one up, gingivalis, I'm not even going to attempt the other two, and they grow uncontrollably and produce malodorous byproducts. And these are particularly volatile sulfur compounds. Now, when we hear the word sulfur, we usually think of rotten eggs. We think of going to Yellowstone. We think of a lot of things where we associate that smell of sulfur. And as we know, that can be problematic for individuals as well. And that's the cause of this chronic bad breath, is these particular species produce these compounds as part of their metabolism. And what they have also, researchers have found, is that those who have this chronic bad breath usually have very little beneficial bacteria in their oral cavities. They may not have any Streptococcus salivarius of any strain. So they have particularly bad mouths to begin with, and they therefore are very vulnerable to reintroducing bad bacteria that is the root cause of this bad breath. So I have probably already explained this one pretty previously in the other slide, but chronic halitosis, not occasional halitosis, is caused generally by eating too much garlic, not brushing or flossing enough, imbalance of oral cavity bacteria, certain medications, or more than one of the above. Give you just a minute because I know I'm already running a little bit short on time, so I'm going to try to probably do this a little bit quicker. Okay, it's slowed down now. Chronic halitosis generally is caused by more than one of the above. Yes, the imbalance of oral cavity bacteria is the predominant cause. You can feasibly get some from not brushing or flossing enough because that provides an environment conducive to bad bacteria coming in. Also, certain medications can destroy that balance of oral cavity bacteria. So you could either have put, and I notice those are the two main answers, imbalance of oral cavity bacteria, certain medications, and then, of course, more than one above if you want to take into account the other factors that can cause it. I'm going to give credit for all of those. I will go through this very quickly. If you look at antibacterial mouthwashes, they produce temporary effects. They kill both the good and the bad bacteria. They disturb the overall microbial balance in the mouth. They are not natural. They use harsh chemicals, most of them do. And as we are have learned recently, they may increase blood pressure. A lot of the components in these antibacterial mouthwashes actually can increase blood pressure. Whereas looking at K12, it's natural, it's gentle, it boosts immune health, restores an overall microbial balance. It is selective inhibition of bad bacteria or pathogenic bacteria. It colonizes, and it provides 24-hour protection against those bad bacteria. I will not spend much time on this. This was a study that was used that confirmed the clinical evidence, provided the clinical evidence we needed to show that K12, when colonized in the oral cavity, can reduce halitosis within 7 days. And of course, for most people, they will have the propensity to, for their oral cavity to go back eventually into that unhealthy state. So consistent use of the K12 strain is recommended, of course. So a little bit of something you probably all know to begin the rest of the presentation about the other bacteria. How do probiotics exert their benefits? Do they produce enzymes? Do they work by competitive inhibition? Do they work by destroying undesirable bacteria? Do they have immune modulating activity? Or can we say it's all of the above? And I'm seeing a large group there, and we will go on to the answer now. And I'm going to have to say all of the above. If we look at the bacteria, the microbiome, the microbiota that inhabit our GI tract, we know that many of them actually produce very important digestive enzymes and other enzymes that help with our the ability for us to digest our food efficiently and optimally. They do provide competitive inhibition against the bad bacteria that want to colonize in the gastrointestinal tract as well as the oral cavity. They do help to destroy undesirable bacteria. We know that the BLIS strains do this. Not all probiotic type of bacteria, not all of the good bacteria that are indigenous to the oral or the gastrointestinal tract actually have that ability, but some do. We know those that have this BLIS type of activity do, and they do, very importantly, have immune modulating activity. So the correct answer, of course, is all of the above on that one. So I'll look very briefly at these other bacteria that are in this probiotic blend that provide additional support, additional immune support for this unique product that you all are selling. First of all, there's Lactobacillus casei. This one is one that survives transit through the acid gastric environment. That is very important that we use species and strains of bacteria that have the capability of surviving through the gastric tract if we want them to survive in the intestinal tract, which is a neutral environment where they have to get to provide the benefits that they have. This Lactobacillus casei LC11 does have that ability. It binds to intestinal mucosa, enabling it to modulate the intestinal immune system, and it may competitively inhibit colonization of certain enteric pathogens. The L. plantarum LP115, that particular strain, also survives transit through the acidic gastric environment. It may influence immune regulation by balancing both interleukin 10 and interleukin 12, and that's been shown in vitro studies. And it helps to balance intestinal mucosal immune response. So keeping that immune response in our very important immune system that occurs in our GI tract. So very important for that. There are other bacteria as well in this probiotic blend. The L. paracasei, LPC37, once again, it can survive the acidic gastric environment. It has the ability to transiently colonize after consumption. It's not one of our indigenous bacteria, but it can transiently colonize for a period of time and produce beneficial effects. It may help improve innate immune response. So that first line of response against pathogenic onslaught into our GI tract, it helps to improve that our own body's first line of response. The L. rhamnosus, LR32, has a high tolerance of acid in intestinal bile. It may influence immune regulation through induction of interleukin 10. It exhibits anti-inflammatory properties through protection against TNBS-induced colitis in an animal model. for instance. So it has a high level of support for an immune response. And Lactobacillus salivarius LS33 has also a high tolerance for GI conditions. In other words, it can survive and become active through the gastric environment, through the action of bile, pepsin and pancreatin, which are both digestive enzymes, which have their job is to break down proteins and other products, so other food products. So it has a tolerance to those. It may influence immune regulation through induction of interleukin-10, once again, very important for immune support. And it exhibits anti-inflammatory attributes to simply keep the GI tract healthy. So I'm going to show you now, you see the supplement facts box, the label of your product that shows, reveals what is in this particular unique probiotic blend. There are dual mechanisms for supporting immune health, both in the oral cavity and in the gastrointestinal tract. It boosts critical immune cells for systemic protection as well. We know how important our immune system that exerts its actions in the GI tract is for overall systemic health. If we can control the actions of pathogenic or undesirable bacteria in both our oral cavity and throughout our GI tract, we can really promote an extra boost of immunity for our entire body. So it's a very important product. So with that, I knew I'm running just a little bit long, so I rushed. I'm sorry I rushed a little bit to the very last of it. I looked at my clock and realized I'm going to have to rush through this a little bit faster. But I will now, if there are questions, I will take those. I think they will verbally be given to me, and I will answer as many as we have time for.
Sounds great, Nena. Wonderful job and great information. Really intriguing how this product really works. I learned a lot myself through that. One of the first questions that actually came up was, at what age can children start taking this? Is there a limit?
Yes, and the limit depends. Actually, the limit depends on how the product is dispensed. I think these are these a chewable tablets?
Correct. They are.
Okay. We all know, if we have very young children, we know that there is a young age at which you do not want to give a child anything that is a tablet or a capsule because of the swallowing risk. However, for very young children, children that are, say, a year old, you could crush the tablets and put them into food and immediately give them the food. We don't want to leave any type of probiotic just sitting for any length of time. But if you put it into their food, crushed it and put it into their food, that would be appropriate. Another way that it is given to very young children is by crushing the tablet and putting it directly on their tongue. What we want to, on these type of products, we want them to have contact in the oral cavity for a period of time. So it gives time for those bacteria to basically find a home and take up residence. And what we recommend is a minimum of 30 seconds within the oral cavity. So if you give it to a young child and give it to them in a form, say a yogurt, or even if they're very young, breast milk has fat in it, so it adheres a little bit more to the teeth, to the gums, and in that way can stay in the mouth for a period of time. That is the best way for it to be given. After children are, upwards 3 to 6, depending on the child, they can suck on a tablet. What we recommend is sucking on it for a period of time instead of chewing. Some children are going to chew. Some adults can't hold something in their mouth without chewing it either. But that's the best way to make sure that it stays in the mouth for a period of time. One of the best ways to take this product is in the evening, after brushing, after flossing, that sort of thing. Take the product at that time, so the last thing before going to bed, and give it to them. Let them have it in their mouth for a while, and then chewing and swallowing, and that is the best way to make sure that it gets in the mouth and stays there for a little while.
Yeah, and as a side note, we have a grandbaby that's she's 2 years old now, but we started giving her the chewable probiotics. I think when she was 1, and noticed a significant difference in her development. Her mother's really told everybody about how wonderful these probiotics are because it really did change their health.
They really do.
For sure. Somebody asked if it was meant to take long term. So is this something that somebody should take, forever?
You could take it forever. And particularly for individuals that have recurrent problems, I think that is to use it on a continual basis is by far the best way. When you're dealing with probiotics or indigenous bacteria, they are in our bodies, and so they are safe to be consumed all the time. Now, for me, I've never had strep throat, so I'm not a person that is prone to that. But I'll just tell you that during the winter months, or if I'm getting on an airplane, which I've been doing a lot of traveling recently, I'm going to be using the Bliss. I'm going to be using it faithfully, and that's it. The one thing about this, for those of you, then this product is ideal. I had not seen it heretofore, where you've got both the probiotics that support the oral health, that support the upper respiratory health, but you also have combined it with probiotics that give that additional immune support in the intestinal tract as well. For people who travel, for people who are around a lot of other people, teachers in particular, those who are in an office environment where you're in an enclosed environment, a great product for them. For those who are vulnerable, take it all the time.
Makes sense. Several people have asked if this should replace regular use of traditional probiotics.
It depends on what the probiotic is. A general probiotic, this product could replace it. There are some strains of bacteria, I'm having a hard time thinking of one right now, that serve particular uses, particularly digestively. There are some of the strains of bacteria that produce particular enzymes, digestive enzymes, and there are individuals who have specific digestive needs that may need to take another probiotic that addresses those needs. But as far as a general probiotic that really is for immune support, that helps the body just overall, this one could replace that type of a probiotic supplement for sure.
Mm-hmm. And we sell another one that's called professional strength probiotics, and for some that may be asking, that one has 10 billion units, where this one would have 1 billion. So people who are dealing with extremely compromised immune system, we want to try to get as much in there as possible, which is why we have that professional strength product available.
Right. And I would say for individuals that are in that situation, they could probably take both. They might even benefit from taking both. Yeah.
I actually do take both just on a regular basis because I believe in probiotics so much.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel the same way.
Somebody asked about maintaining oral health in spite of tooth loss, root canals, and mercury fillings, and those are all different topics. But I would say that I would guess that the oral health probiotic would help no matter what the condition in the mouth is, and would probably help with ongoing issues.
Right. Yes, definitely. When you think that a lot of times periodontal health is an immune health issue, that inflammation that occurs in the gums is an immune health issue. So you really want to do everything you can to support the immune health in the mouth because it has such far-reaching repercussions in the rest of the body.
Mm-hmm. And having the right bacteria in the mouth would help with cavity prevention, would it not?
Yes, it definitely does.
Yeah. Well, I think we covered most of the questions here. I don't see anything else standing out, but I sure appreciate you taking the time tonight, Nena, to share this great information with us. It has been wonderful. So thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you. It has been my pleasure, as I said. I enjoyed it. I wish you the very best. This is a great product, and I know it will do well.
Yes, great. It really is. And I'm even more excited about it just after hearing your presentation tonight. To highlight our winners for tonight, 3-month supply of this oral health probiotics. We have Carla Coles, Pat Roman, and Tanya Beachy. Thank you so much for everyone for joining us, and somebody from customer service will be in touch with our lucky winners probably tomorrow. But we thank everybody for joining us this evening. We pray that you have an awesome 2017, and we look forward to next month's presentation, and we'll be talking about another great topic, and I believe that one's going to be done by Ann Malcolm, my wife. So we look forward to that time. But until then, may God bless you and you be in health. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Please stand by.